Halloween cemented the rules for the slasher genre in 1978, but the release of Friday the 13th in 1980 officially kicked off the golden age of the slasher film. Producers hoping for big returns on small investments gave filmmakers the chance to push the slasher formula in every direction. Some went campy, some went serious, but they all had one thing in common: critics hated them. Welcome to the Cinema Cult. I'm your guide, CT, and today we're setting the record straight on 8 slashers from the early 80s and showing some love to these underseen films that either bombed at theaters or were totally trashed by critics at the time. Now, the best thing about this era is there's literally something for everyone here. And I really wanted to start off with a fun movie, and I got a sports-themed whodunit slasher that's about as cheesy as it gets. This one's called Graduation Day. Graduation Day is one of the few box office success stories on this list, but that doesn't mean people liked it. This movie was boycotted by Siskel and Ebert and other critics who refused to review it just because it was a slasher. Now, of course, this one's also sitting at a cool 19% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, so critics aren't the only ones who didn't seem to get Graduation Day. So it's my job to tell you how wrong you all are. Because right off the bat, this is a rare, sports-themed slasher. It kicks off with a track star named Laura collapsing and dying at the finish line of her last race while the rest of the team looks on in horror. And thanks to some creative editing, it even almost looks like Linnea Quigley's character is actually there. But that's not the only trick this movie's trying to pull, because this is a whodunit that wants to point the finger in as many directions as possible, setting up a number of characters to possibly be the black-gloved killer, rocking a sweatsuit and a fencing mask. Maybe it's one of these various side characters. A pre-Wheel of Fortune Vanna White's looking awfully suspicious. And this movie didn't have the special effects budget of the more well-known slashers of the time, but the kills get an A for creativity. The pole vaulter landing on a bed of spikes is absolutely a highlight, but my personal favorite, it's gotta be the football player who stumbles upon the killer in the bushes and gets taken out with what I can only describe as a football sword. But the scene this movie is most famous or infamous for is the roller rink graduation dance sequence where we've got new wave band Felony performing the same song for the better part of 10 minutes. Seriously, it goes on so long the killer manages to squeeze in 2 murders, and at one point, the guitar player is just visibly checked out, clearly just as tired of this song as the rest of us. So if you're looking for a slasher that's more absurd than scary, and you don't mind a movie that's a little rough around the edges, check out Graduation Day. And since I started with a fun one, let's get more serious with this next selection. This is a slow burn that owes as much to Deliverance as it does Friday the 13th. It's called Just Before Dawn. Just Before Dawn is a film that's rightfully earned reappraisal in recent years, but when it was released in 1981, not only was it dismissed by critics, audiences who were looking for another Friday the 13th ripoff were left bored by the slow pace and the lack of gratuitous gore. The director Jeff Lieberman had resisted pressure to increase the kill count, and 80s audiences punished him for that choice. But it turns out, he was right all along. Because Just Before Dawn was not trying to be another camper kill fest, and it's as much a backwoods thriller as it is a backwoods slasher. It follows some expected beats like an early kill from an unseen maniac and a young group of campers arriving confident and cocky, ignoring the warnings of the old park ranger. But this film, it's more interested in atmosphere and feelings of dread than body count, and it builds with a patience rarely seen in a slasher movie. And this is a movie that's absolutely filled with incredible shots of the Oregon forest, and it's made all the better by some excellent sound design. As the movie opens, the sounds of the forest don't sound welcoming at all. They sound more like a warning. And well, like any great slasher, of course, this one's got a great final girl in Connie. She literally transforms as this movie plays out. Starting out looking the part of a prepared camper, but by the end, she's sporting a pair of Daisy Dukes and showing off that midriff, and that's what makes her almost feral dispatching of this backwoods killer so shocking. It's 100% a top-tier final girl kill from any era of the slasher genre. Just Before Dawn was written off as slow and uneventful, but I'm glad this one stuck around so we could reevaluate it and enjoy it for what it is. One of the finest slow burn backwoods slashers ever made. So if you're more interested in tension than gore, this is the slasher for you. Just Before Dawn was a warning to avoid the wilderness, but in my next film, the danger comes to town in the form of a traveling carnival with some seriously messed up secrets. It's called The Funhouse. Director Tobe Hooper spent most of his career trying to live up to the lofty expectations set by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is pretty much an impossible task. Now, I'm personally a big fan of his 1980s output, and that starts with this one called The Funhouse. This was Tobe Hooper's first major studio picture, but audiences who were expecting a gore fest left disappointed, and it underperformed big time at the box office. Critics weren't any kinder, with TV Guide calling this one a cut below the norm. But what those critics and that audience failed to realize is that The Funhouse took the basic formula from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and flipped it on its head. These doomed teens on a double date aren't wandering into a rural nightmare. Instead, the horror has come to their hometown in the form of a traveling carnival. The older I get, the more I appreciate how long this movie spends following these four wandering around this carnival and taking in all the freakish sights. It's a strange atmosphere where everything feels a little bit grimier than it should, and this movie spends a lot of time letting you soak it in along with these characters before they make the fateful mistake of deciding to hide out and spend the night in the funhouse. And they could have never imagined they'd be witness to a murder when a Frankenstein-masked carny strangles the fortune teller after a deal gone wrong. Now the four of them are trapped in this carnival ride with a killer and his very motivated father hunting them down. Yeah, that's right. This guy is the Barker's son, and when that Frankenstein mask comes off, it's one of the wildest slasher villain reveals of all time. Even though the kills in this movie aren't particularly gory, they're really effective, and there's a certain nastiness to this film that just can't be denied. The creature design is genuinely unsettling, and the Carnival Barker father comes across as particularly vicious. It's clear this guy is no stranger to covering up murder, and he'd have no problem making these four teens disappear. So if you're looking for a slasher that lets you soak in the sights before the killings start, make sure you check out The Funhouse. Now, you may have noticed these first three picks were all from 1981. I've got one more selection left from that year. This movie stars one of the most famous faces in all of horror history. It's called Hell Night. Hell Night is a unique slasher from 1981 because its director drew his inspiration as much from classic haunted house movies as he did contemporary slashers. And the results are something that plays out kind of like an R-rated Scooby-Doo movie set in a gothic mansion. And it didn't have the fast pace or the over-the-top gore audiences at the time were looking for, but thanks to its incorporation of classic horror elements, this one is aged like a fine wine. Hell Night is also notable for casting horror legend Linda Blair as its final girl Marty, and she's tasked with spending the night at the spooky Garth mansion along with three other pledges. And the background on this place reads like a suburban campfire story. It's been empty for the past 12 years because the wealthy patriarch of this family lost it one night, murdering the whole family in gruesome fashion. The only thing is, the body of his youngest son was never found, and legend has it, he still lurks in the tunnels beneath the estate. Now, Linda Blair actually received a Razzie nomination for this role, but I really don't understand why. She's a solid final girl, and I felt like she had a good amount of chemistry with the leading man, Jeff. Of course, they were both overshadowed by my favorite character in this movie, a surfer dude named Seth who knows how to party, but also knows that when the cops aren't listening, sometimes you gotta break into the evidence room to steal some weapons, hijack a car, and rush back to help your friends. And this movie takes full advantage of its setting, shooting at a real mansion in California that absolutely looks the part. The main rooms are cavernous and filled with spooky shadows, and like any good creepy mansion, it's also filled with secret tunnels. It really makes you feel like there could be someone hiding around the corner or behind the walls at any time. Hell Night's a movie that takes some time for the action to set in, and blending haunted house horror with slasher conventions in 1981 made it feel out of step with its contemporaries, but it's also why this movie's held up so well over the years. So if you're looking for a slasher with a more timeless feel, check out Hell Night. Moving on to 1982, it's time to ditch the professional productions for a film shot on location at UCLA that earned itself a place on the UK's banned list. Let's talk about The Dorm That Dripped Blood. The Dorm That Dripped Blood is an overachieving, super low-budget slasher made by a couple of students at UCLA who were really inspired by Friday the 13th. They even went so far as taking out a full-page ad in Variety advertising this movie before it was filmed, just like Sean Cunningham did with the original Friday the 13th. Now, unfortunately, this one was doomed from the start. The distributor that picked it up renamed it from its original title, Death Dorm, to a much less menacing Pranks. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, this is a film that was butchered by censors who literally cut out all the best parts, and even with all that censorship, this movie somehow still earned a place on the UK's video nasty list, likely thanks to its extremely dark ending. Now, it's not surprising critics weren't kind to this movie, and after it failed to generate audience attention under the terrible name Pranks, it was finally released under this title, The Dorm That Dripped Blood, in 1983, and it did have some regional success. The setup is classic slasher stuff. We've got a small group of students staying back on break to help shut down a dorm, and they think they're alone, but there's still some other folks lurking around, like the maintenance man and the frizzy-haired weirdo who's diving in the dumpsters. Before they even have a chance to get to work, though, they start getting picked off. Now, what really makes this movie for me are the variety of the kills. This killer has no signature weapon or preferred method of execution, and he's happy to use whatever's on hand, whether that be a nail-studded baseball bat, an electric drill, or an industrial pressure cooker. And these clever kill sequences are exactly why you need to watch the uncut version of this film to have the best time possible. And lucky for us, that version was finally released by Synapse Films in 2011, who restored all that great gore. I also enjoyed the whodunit angle of this film, but it really separates itself from other early 80s slashers with an ending that broke the slasher rulebook, and it's one you're not gonna forget. Moving on from there, I'm sticking with the single location slashers, but we're heading out of the dorms and over to the hospital. This one's called Hospital Massacre. Hospital Massacre is a straight up fever dream of a movie, and if you start asking logical questions like, why would someone wait hours for a person due back in 5 minutes? Well, maybe sit this one out. But if you can embrace the illogical, you're gonna enjoy this movie that plays out like an insane nightmare for this protagonist named Susan. And the clear lack of logic is what got it panned by critics back in the day, but for me, that's what makes this movie so entertaining. And it kicks off back in 1961 when Susan was just a child. Her and her brother were laughing at a classmate's Valentine, and that kid did not take it well at all, murdering Susan's brother off screen. Now, without any explanation as to what happened to that kid, we fast forward 19 years. Susan's a brunette now, and she's heading to the hospital to pick up some routine test results. What she doesn't know is that kid's grown up to infiltrate this hospital staff, and he's messed with her files to make it look like she's seriously ill. So now, she's stuck in a hospital filled with unhelpful staff and unhinged patients. Meanwhile, there's a guy in a surgical mask slicing and dicing his way through the hallways and stacking up those bodies in an abandoned floor that apparently no one cares about. Now, I love the killer's look in this movie. It's a simple disguise, but the way he's shot makes him look really intimidating, and his crazy eyes definitely help sell the part. Probably my favorite shot of the movie is when he's chasing a nurse down the hallway with a sheet, arms fully extended, intending to trap her. And those few seconds really capture the vibes of this movie. There's just something disturbing about the way he's running down that hallway. But the icing on this crazy cake is a fantastic final girl finish where she not only sets this guy on fire, but she uses a straight up matador move to send him sailing right over the edge of the building. The Hospital Massacre is one of the stranger entries on this list, and it's got moments that are both cheesy and disturbing. So if you're looking for a surreal single location slasher that might make you feel a little uncomfortable and will definitely leave you scratching your head, check this one out. Hospital Massacre showed the nightmare of being trapped by a psycho, but my next film shows what happens when the crazies break out of the hospital with murder on their minds. It's called Alone in the Dark. Alone in the Dark may be the most impressive film on this entire list, so it's really a shame it got lost in the mix back in 1982, and I'm glad that over time it's been recognized as one of the better slashers of the era, and an impressive debut for director Jack Shoulder, who took full advantage of this fantastic cast. Donald Pleasance plays Dr. Leo Bain, an eccentric psychiatrist running this asylum where the patients are called voyagers and are treated with a mostly hands-off approach. This guy is pretty much like the anti-Dr. Loomis Loomis, and he's pretty much always got a pipe in his hand, and that thing's not for smoking tobacco. Now, when his new psychiatrist, Dr. Potter, joins the staff, the four most dangerous Voyagers are convinced this guy must have murdered their beloved previous doctor. And that crew includes Jack Palance as a terrifying ex-POW, Martin Landau as a deeply unhinged former minister, and fans of the 1987 movie The Running Man will recognize this hulking figure as the electrifying Dynamo. Just don't expect him to break out into opera singing in this role. There's also a serial killer in this group known as the Bleeder, since he gets nosebleeds when he kills, but he doesn't like to show his face. Now, when a citywide blackout knocks out the hospital security, these four escape, intent on killing the new doctor and anyone else in their way. And I love that these four are supposed to be the mental patients, but as soon as they break out, they're confronted with a chaotic scene that includes rioting and looting, and all of a sudden, they seem like the most sane people around. Except for the murderous plans, that is. Now, the home invasion siege that follows that is super tense, with a body count that turns the normal slasher conventions on its head, since all but one of the people killed in this movie are men. But really, what sets Alone in the Dark apart from your typical slasher are the completely unhinged performances from the mental patients. And watching them, it's a genuine pleasure as they're doing terrible things. So if you're looking for a more character-driven style slasher, check out Alone in the Dark. Moving on to my last film on this list, I've got one about an obsessive fan who's stalking his favorite actress halfway around the world. You're not going to want to miss this one. It's called The Last Horror Film. With a name like The Last Horror Film, I just had to end my list with this one. And not only is it a great film on its own, but it also pairs really well with another one of my favorite early 80s slashers, Maniac. And that's because both these movies have the same leads. We got Joe Spinell playing a very similar character as in Maniac. He's a sweaty New Yorker with an uncomfortable obsession. But this time he's named Vinny. The Maniac's protagonist was obsessed with women nearby. Vinny, he's fixated on a movie star. She's the hottest scream queen going. Her name is Jana Bates, and she's played by Caroline Munro. It's not a big stretch here playing this movie star either. Caroline was a Bond girl in The Spy Who Loved Me after all, so it does make sense that when this movie makes its way over to Cannes, she looks right at home. Cause yeah, you heard me right, this movie is mostly filmed at the 1981 Cannes Film Festival, with this guy Vinny running around trying to figure out a way to get this girl to star in his horror movie. Now, unsurprisingly, once Vinny arrives, all the people closest to Jana start dropping dead. It's a whodunit that's constantly pointing the finger at Vinny while always leaving the door open that it could be someone else who's responsible. Compared to Maniac, the gore in this movie is considerably lighter, as is the tone. It's a movie that skates the line of horror and comedy, and it kind of confused audiences back in 1981. But now it looks more like a precursor to a movie like Scream. And by the way, Jana's fictional movie she's promoting here, it's called Scream. Yeah, don't tell me Wes Craven never saw this movie. Now, interestingly, some of my favorite shots here have absolutely nothing to do with the plot. I really just love these peeks into what this film festival looked like over 40 years ago. It's a real time capsule, and it gives the movie a setting and energy that's impossible to replicate. Now, I can only imagine what it must have been like for Caroline Munro to film the scene where she's running through the crowds wearing nothing but a towel, because yeah, they actually did that guerrilla style. So if you're looking for a slasher that's set in a very non-typical location, you gotta make time for The Last Horror Film. You're gonna love it. So there you have it, 8 slashers from the golden age of the early 80s that were largely dismissed, but are absolutely worth your time. And this list really shows how diverse slasher movies were becoming, and each one of these movies did their own thing with the slasher formula. And it also really shows the ignorance of the critics who boycotted this genre back then on some sort of ridiculous moral crusade. And if you had a good time getting into these underappreciated slashers with me, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons to join the cult, and make sure you comment with your favorite early 80s slasher down below, because there are so many gems from that time period and I could only cover 8 here today. And you can check out more of my favorite slasher movies right here. That's it for me. I'm CT Reese. Thanks for hanging out, and keep watching weird movies. I know I will.